Right.
Good morning, everybody. It is now 10 o'clock, and I think almost, well, a lot of people are here, so it's time that we can start the meeting. So welcome to everybody, and just to say that we are recording the meeting, and if there are any concerns or objections to that, could you raise your hands now? Virtually or literally, if you've got your camera on. I can't see any objections, and it is really helpful for when the notes are written. So thank you for that. So welcome to the 6th meeting of the Future of Adult Social Care Commission. We'll start with some protocols to make sure that everyone can access the meeting easily. And the request is that if you're not speaking, then please could you turn your camera and the sound off, because that helps that the person who is speaking can be on full screen. And could you make sure that your face is fully visible? If you can see your shoulders, you're probably your face is well visible. So try to speak clearly and not to use acronyms if possible, and identify yourself before speaking. So I'd better start by doing that. My name's Val Armstrong. I'm Councillor for Leighton Chester, but also Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care and Public Health and Chair of this Commission. So we'll quickly go around and introduce the Commission members. So I'll look at my list on the right, and Councillor Edwards, could you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Gillian Edwards, Councillor for Weaver and Cuddington Ward. Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. Gary Cliff.
Yes, good morning. Yeah, Gary Cliff. I'm the Interim Chief Executive for Cheshire West Voluntary Action, supporting a number of voluntary community and faith and social enterprises across Cheshire West.
Thanks, Gary. Gina, Councillor Lewis.
Councillor Gina Lewis. I represent the Winsford, Over and Verdon Ward for Cheshire West and Chester, and I'm also a Winsford Town Councillor now.
Thanks, Gina. Keith Miller.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Councillor Keith Miller, representing Neston Ward.
Thanks, Keith. And Lynn Riley.
Good morning, Val. Sorry about the state of my broadband, but I am Lynn Riley, representing the Frodsham Ward.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Lynn. Apologies. We've received apologies from Alison Lee, who has moved on to a job and with the integrated care system. And also Councillor Sullivan has said he may, due to work commitments, he may have to go in and out of the meeting. We also have some officers with us, and I'm going to suggest that they introduce themselves as they speak, and that will save us precious time in the meeting, so that we can listen to our presenters and then have some discussion at the end. So is there anything else, Morgan?
Just to mention, Del Curtis has given her apologies as well.
Sorry, can you say that again? Sorry.
Pardon me. Del Curtis has given her apologies as well.
Oh, thank you.
Pardon me.
Thanks. Right. Okay, so if we could all keep our cameras off until it's time to speak. Thank you. You can see one of our speakers there popping up. I'd just like to remind us that our final meeting will be in May, when we'll focus on developing our recommendations. So if you have any thoughts about recommendations following the presentations today, then please bring them in, and we will have a further meeting to pull everything together from what we've heard over the six sessions. All the sessions have been open to the public and been recorded so that people can access the recordings afterwards. We did ask for a public call for evidence, and that is still open. And any comments or stories that have been shared with us will be put on the website with permission, of course. So I did want to just, and we have usually taken a few moments to share what we heard at the last meeting, just to refresh ourselves. The last meeting started with a presentation from Lynn Turnbull from Disability Positive, and she spoke about the real benefits that people can have from employing a personal assistant through direct payments, and she talked through 3 very powerful case studies of people who currently use personal assistants, the really great advantages they talked about, but also some of the challenges in terms of recruitment and things like that. So and she made some suggestions about how that possibility could be promoted by referring everyone through for a discussion about direct payments and personal assistance. So Andrew Burridge, another speaker, spoke about recruitment and retention issues across the whole sector, and specifically in the Northwest. And we heard about some of the ways the council has been extending and improving its recruitment, and also a very powerful presentation from Dan Masters at iCare about the real difficulties that they and all the sector are experiencing in recruiting, the investment of funding they're putting into recruitment, but still the difficulties experienced. And then part of the meeting was to look at technology-enabled care, and we heard about what's happening across Cheshire and Merseyside, new sorts of equipment, new sorts of connections that in technology. So and then we looked at how the use of technology can delay the need for more intensive forms of care and what the future holds, and also our own pilot in Cheshire West on technology-enabled care. So that was a very full meeting. I don't know whether anybody else has any comments from that last meeting that they'd like to introduce now. And if not, we'll move on to our next and first item on the agenda, and I would like to very much welcome Anne Brown, someone who uses social care services, and also with her is support from Joanne Carr from HFT. So Anne, are you ready to tell us about your story and your experiences?
Yes.
Good. Right. In that case, I'm passing over to you for you to
Hi, can you just clarify what you'd like Anne to say?
Hello, it looks like Val has suddenly popped off, hasn't she? She's disappeared from view.
Looks like, yeah.
I don't know what happened there. So I think the general idea was to Anne ask you to talk. Oh no, it looks like Val's back. No, I'll shut up because Val's back.
Sorry, sorry. Anne, we'd like you to tell us your story about how about using and drawing on social care services, what's good about it and what, you know, what you don't like, what could be improved. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Right, over to you.
My name is Anne. Live in house with Paul, Janet, Alan, and Joe, Jill, Sue, Chris, Dawn.
Who support you? We support you,
Yeah.
don't
Different staff support me. Do rubbish on bin and do the dinner south and do my bed
Do household skills, don't you?
skills go odd Saturdays, different Saturdays,
You work in a shop,
shop,
in a cafe.
cafe, sports Saturday, go mum's weekend, back here Sunday night, back Saturday, Monday, and go shopping and
Cafe bowling.
bowling Monday night.
What else do you do? Art and craft.
Crafts with Chris Brown on Thursday morning. Cafe tomorrow morning with rain. Got different trips out. Got holidays and nice weather. YouTube in the back garden of family, different family around. And do shopping, house shopping for food, different food we like, and put up floor, do my clothes self, and wash up dishes, wash dry dishes away, and
Very helpful, aren't
yeah, it's helpful.
you? You're on mute.
Not doing very well this morning. Are you okay if we ask you some questions?
Yes.
Yeah, right. I think you've told us about who you live with.
Yeah.
And who comes to help you. And then you went through each day what sort of things you do.
Yeah.
And that you like.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned holidays.
Yeah, holidays.
Where have you been on your holidays?
Caravan, Wales, or Wood.
Real.
The
Robin Hood camp.
Club.
Wales. Right. Okay.
Monday to Friday.
Right. Monday to Friday.
Friday.
Excellent. Right. And what is the best thing for you about living in the house?
Do you like about living here?
Like it, quiet.
It's quiet.
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 Yes,
You get on with
Right.
it, Jesus,
yes,
though.
yeah. Cover.
Right. Okay. And is there anything else you would like to make your life even better?
Anything you'd like that would make your life better living here? Oh, you're happy.
Happy.
She's
Mhm.
happy.
She's happy. You're happy.
Happy.
Anne. You're happy.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And I didn't quite catch everything that you do, but you seem to have something to do every day. Is that right?
Yeah, the only day that Anna's off is a Tuesday.
Oh, right.
She's quite a sociable and busy person. And she's working in a shop on a Friday, and she works in a local cafe on a Wednesday.
Right. Okay. That's good. And do you go to a day centre at all?
Saturday.
No, the day
Sports.
centre, that the centre you
Oh,
go
yeah.
to on a Monday.
Was it? Yes.
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 Where do you go?
Vivo.
Vivo.
It's the Vivo in the Civic Centre.
In the Civic Centre.
Yeah,
Right. Okay. At Ellesmere Port.
yeah.
Yeah. And how often is that, Anne?
Monday, innit?
Monday.
That's Monday.
Yeah, Monday.
Right. But just one day a week.
Yeah, the shop and the cafe are to do with the centre, but they're not in the Civic Centre. They're in different places.
Right. Okay, well, Anne, that sounds like a busy life. I'm going to see if anybody else who is here would like to ask you a question. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah? Right, I'm just looking to see if anybody's got their hand up. And I can see that Gina has. Gina, would you like to ask Anne a question? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. Hello, Anne.
Hello, Gina.
It's good to see you. Looking so well.
Yeah.
You have a very, very busy social life. What do you enjoy most?
Work in a shop
Right.
on Friday
Yes. Yeah.
with Donna.
Good. And what about the people you live with? Do they sometimes go with you?
Staff tabby. Jam tabby sometimes.
Yeah.
The other people in the house, one of the other ladies attends the day centre and does the shop on a different day. So it's like a placement. So Anne's is on a Friday and the other ladies is on a Wednesday.
Thank you very much, Anne.
Okay.
It's good to see you looking so happy.
Yeah. You happy, Gina?
Thank you.
Gina.
Okay.
Jo.
Yeah.
Is there anything you would like to add to support what Anne has told us?
No, Anne's quite a happy, lady. She's full of life, and she enjoys everything that she does. And been a lot of changes over the past 2 years at the house, and for the better, don't you think?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, we're getting there.
Right. Okay. Well, I can't see any more questions. So, Anne, I'd like to say thank you very much for joining us this morning. And if you'd like to carry on listening, you're very welcome. But if you want to go away and have a cup of tea, that's okay too. Okay. So thank you very much indeed for joining us, Anne. Okay, and thank you, Joanne, for coming along.
No worries. Thank you very much. Say bye.
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 Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Right. Okay. That's we'll move on to our speakers, and the first one is Pip Cannons, and I can see that Pip is here from Community Catalysts. Hello, Pip. So would you like to introduce yourself, and then we've allowed about 15 minutes and 10 minutes for questions, and I know that you're keen to tell us about everything Community Catalysts gets up to, so I'll pass over to you now.
Thank you, that's really kind. Hi everybody, just quickly introduce myself. I'm Pip Cannons, I'm from Community Catalysts, and I'll tell you a little bit about the organisation in a minute. I've been asked to talk to you really with two hats on, because only 8 months ago I used to work in a local authority in the southwest, down where I live, in Somerset, as a commissioner. So today I just want to give you a bit of a perspective really from two parts, from my commissioning background and now as a provider, and look at what that looks like and what my thoughts are around that, to sort of hopefully stimulate some questions. So please do stop me as I go through the presentation. There's nothing worse than a one-way conversation, so do put your hand up and hopefully I'll see you. If not, just shout out and stop me from talking from time to time. I'm going to share a presentation now, so just bear with while I share it. Okay, can you all see that?
Yes.
Fab. That's reassuring. Thank you very much. Okie dokes. So first of all then, as I said, I want to talk to you from two perspectives, with my commissioner hat on and then with my provider hat on, because I found that by constantly changing those hats, that's given me a really great perspective and enabled me to see some really some big opportunities as those two roles overlap in the middle. And I'll come back to that at the end. So first of all, I want to talk from a commissioner's point of view and just give you a little bit of insight into the things that I've done in the past and what difference that's made to the system that I was working in, and how I've then used that in my new role as a provider. So I think the first thing as a commissioner is always about recognising the problem. And for me, I was new to commissioning when I started in Somerset. I'd come from business, and so I was very familiar with working in a transformation or a change environment, putting new stuff in, having good ideas. I'm a marketeer by background, by the way, so that kind of gives you an insight into the type of person I am. And I found that when I looked at what was going on in Somerset, I could just see that there was a really difficult situation. Our staff were in a place where they were despairing about the job, they were unhappy, there was a lot of sickness, there were lots of vacancies, and people that used our services were very unhappy about it. We had really poor feedback on provision. And the system itself was demonstrating this. It was creaking. And we could see that in all the figures that we had. So we had long wait lists for assessments, to get people out of hospital, to get people a care package. You know, all of the stats were going in the wrong direction. So demand was out of control. Our costs were out of control as well. It was that typical sort of cycle of Lots of demand, very high costs, unable to afford it. We were having to make some significant savings, over £10 million just within adult social care at the same time. And basically, you know, all I could see was problems all around. I think the other thing that I noticed when I talked to the social workers at this time was about the types of the methodology. We were basically treating people as a process. I often describe it as a sausage machine. You know, it was very much a conveyor belt. We would bring, you know, it would be absolutely about assessment, find out if anyone's eligible. If they're eligible, then move them on to the next phase, which is, you know, start to find a care package or a residential home, because those were our only two options, and off they go. So it was very much same process for everybody, not tailored, and very little time to listen to the individual stories, as we've just had the privilege of doing with Anne. So we didn't find out the things that excited the individuals, like Anne's just told us about. Did she talk about her eligible needs at all in that conversation? She didn't. She talked to us about going shopping. She talked to us about her jobs. She talked to us about the things that she likes, about where she lives and the people that she sees. So those are the things that were missing in this process, because we were just churning people through in this pressure that was coming into the system. Now, I'm sure this is something that you'll find quite familiar if you talk to people on your front line as well. This story probably resonates quite a lot. So from a commissioner's perspective, and well, actually from my perspective, I just wanted to do something different. So I grasped an opportunity that presented itself. I knocked on my director's door and just said, I need to do something about this. What can I do? Can I, you know, please just get involved, do something differently? And I was very lucky. I had a very innovative, if you like, and supportive director who said, yeah, do whatever it takes, get on and just make a difference. So that was a real opportunity. Having that permission to make a difference really changed my my role as a commissioner. So instead of just reinventing the same wheel, I was able to stand back from that wheel. I was able to look differently at the problem and find solutions. And I didn't do that on my own. It was very much about going in, listening, talking to people, identifying some solutions. So my role changed from being the traditional commissioner who looks at a service and then procures more, so buys things, if you like, to really very much being just an enabler. I listened and I put in place the things that the staff told me they wanted, that people told me they wanted, and commissioners told me, not commissioners, the community told me that they wanted. So it was about listening, it was about enabling, and it was about prompting, questioning. Those were the things that I did. So my role was very, very different to when I'd started. And the what happened is that instead of commissioning a service, what ended up happening is that we just changed the way of working. So it became about connecting. It became about being part of our communities. So really a lot of my role was actually encouraging the social work teams to open their front door, to get out of the office, to find out what was out there in their communities, to understand it, to connect to people, and to listen more, to spend time listening to people. So rather than assessing people, listen to people, find out what motivates them and make a difference, so that we were connecting together those things and finding the opportunities in our community. There were a couple of things that as a commissioner I did then have to put in place as tools to enable that different conversation, that different way of working. And for me, those were connectors, so people who worked in the community that helped people to have that open conversation and to connect to different things in their community. So village agents was one thing that I put in place. Another thing was the micro providers, which I'll talk about in a minute. But those are local people providing local care and support to individuals in their own community. So neighbours helping neighbours and being paid to be able to do that as well, so that you've got some sustainability in that system. And over time, this project absolutely demonstrated that it worked, because obviously all the time there's these pressures, aren't there, in the system that I talked about at the beginning, because it is about the money, it is about the time, it is about the pressures that come to the system from within the system and from without the system. Because let's face it, the NHS pressures, which we've seen over the last 2 years, are very apparent in adult social care at the moment. But over time, we absolutely saw that there was a real difference to what was happening in the system. We saw that wait times came down, the number of people in residential care came down, the number of people that were reporting better outcomes went up, and the cost savings were also very real. So from a system point of view, the system, it was a big tick. From people's perspective, it was a big tick. People liked what they got, and there was a, more variety, more choice for people. So from my point of view, being a commissioner is about innovating. It's about thinking differently. It's about being creative. And I think it is a state of mind. I think it is about the art of the possible. But, and this is a big but, I think there are things that can derail you in that process. You have to be very determined, very strong to cut through and to enable that change. There are, in other words, many things that can derail you on that journey. And I just want to flag a few of those up. Some of them come from the system. The way that our systems are set up means that very often there are short-term financial pressures. So those short-term financial pressures can mean that there's that constant pressure to make savings in year, and that can mean that we cost save. So we pull back from the things that we don't see as important or very that don't make a return in the same year. We also have siloed budgets. So one of the questions I had when I started this piece of work was, I need a bit of money to make this happen. Not a lot. I don't think I need a lot, but how do I get some of that money? Because it was all tied up. There was a home care budget, there was a residential budget, there was a learning disability budget, and all of those were tied up. There was nothing that enabled me to pull it out from different places. So what I had to do was get people signed up to the fact that what I was going to do was going to, in the long term, it was an invest to save process. So we put a little bit of money in up front, but in the long term we started to pull it out of some of the other budgets. But those are the kind of things that can really derail you on the way if you don't have that opportunity, if you have siloed thinking along with your siloed budgets and your siloed financial processes. I think the other thing that I think is really important is just pressure. I mentioned pressure. There's time pressure. There's pressure from the system itself, with lots of people wanting support. So constant telephone calls, and how does the team get on top of that? With the NHS wanting people to get out of hospital as quickly as possible. So all of these are very real things that can derail a programme that is really looking to the long term, that's really trying to change demand from the start, and to make it so that you don't get to this total crisis management cycle that we currently are kind of locked in. I think one of the things that I found throughout is that the perception from many that community solutions and doing things differently are nice to have, they're not essential, and I also a perception that some of these different things that we started to think about were more risky, were not as safe as some of the other types of provision. And a lot of that came from fear of the unknown. It came from not understanding, it came from not knowing who these people were that were providing different types of support. Who were these micro providers? Who were these village agents? Could we trust them? Could we share information with them? All of those kind of questions. So I had to spend an awful lot of time with social work teams, encouraging, sharing information, reassuring, spending time to build trust between different parts of these new types of providers and the individuals. I think also it's very important to recognise that there is a very loud voice from people as well within the current system. So people know what they currently have, and there is a fear of the unknown as well. So people, families, carers can also be very loud in sharing that they don't want to change, but I would say it's really important that we do engage with people in order to get them to understand and to listen to what it is that they're worried about, so that we are co-producing, co-designing and collaborating with all parts of the system. So what we design isn't in isolation, and it is what people actually want. So I think risk is something that I would absolutely flag as a big derailer in a system if we allow it to be. So now just switching over then, so from a commissioner's perspective, I think it's all possible. It was hard work, but it is possible. I then moved over last July to becoming a provider. I had created a really vibrant community enterprise programme in Somerset that was thriving, and I believed that that should be available throughout the whole country, and I wanted the opportunity to be able to do that. So I've joined Community Catalysts. We're an organisation, a social enterprise that was put in place in 2010 to do just that. It was all about creating choice for people who need some care and support to live their lives, to make it so that it was an exciting opportunity, so that people have variety and choice, and it's not all about the sort of the personal care and those sorts of things. It's more about how can we help people to live a really good life. So that's what we believe in passionately. We believe that people have the opportunity, and it is possible to provide that choice and that opportunity within our communities. So we know that some people need care and support to live their lives, and we also know that giving people money, so direct payments, ISFs, is one part of the equation that is important, but just giving people money to help them find support doesn't result in happy people if there isn't a choice of different types of support available in the community. And so that's the thing that I think is often missing. The issue isn't just that there isn't enough care in the system, it's that there isn't enough of the right kinds of care and support in the system. There's lots of, you know, we can cookie cut home care, but is that what people want? Is it that people, you know, just want someone that comes into their home on a time and motion to sort of get people up, get dressed, get a meal, and off they go again, and a different person might come in the evening? That's not what people say when we talk to them. And I go again back to Anne. She didn't mention any of that. She mentioned the things that she enjoys doing. The support that we look to put in place is very much focused on what people enjoy. It's focused on enabling people to live that good life, and it also provides the support as well, but it's not the thing that's the front and foremost. So in other words, we're moving from being a transactional provider to being a provider that enables a good life. So what we do is we focus on what communities have, what people have, rather than what they lack. So instead of being about needs and eligibility, we just talk about what is it that would make your life really great, and how can we help you to get that. And we work with communities, with local people, to put those things in place. So if you like, we're a bit like a Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. We pick up these ideas, these sparks, we mix them all together, and we help to create a really diverse and hyper-local marketplace that enables local people to support local people, local jobs, local money, and people who need care and support living lives within their own homes, within their own communities, in a way that suits them. That's what comes out at the end of this. A key part of our role, and this is where I sort of cycle back to the provider view, coming back to meeting with the commissioner, a key part of our role is not just that going out into the communities and finding people who are willing to help other people within their community. We can find spades of those, loads of them. It's really easy. You just ask people within a community, you know, by talking about somebody within the community that needs support, other people will often put up their hand and say, yeah, I'd love to help. That's something I'm interested in. our role is very much about the things, the blocks, the things that can, to move away the blocks and to help people to bridge over to from that idea into making that real. So there are things to overcome. There are, you know, the risks to overcome, if you like, so that we've got this process, this way of working that enables us to bridge over, so that we can put the people who want to provide care together with the people who need care, and the two can come together within the system, and the whole thing works well. And some of these key enablers are absolutely about working with system leaders, because if there isn't the right conversation going on within the system, within social care teams, within hospital teams, if there isn't that opportunity through the direct payments, if they are not at a rate that is going to help, then the marketplace will not succeed. It will not thrive. So a lot of our time on our programmes, as I said, is spent working with system leaders and with policymakers, ensuring that the right ingredients are in place. And it can make a difference. This is just a list. I'm not going to go through it all, but we know and we have lots of evidence that's supported by reports that we've had from independent research from universities that show this is really good value for money, at least 4 times as much money in terms of the value that comes out for every pound that goes in. People are really well supported. They like this type of support. We've got loads of great stories of people saying what a difference it's made to them having a local person and a variety of local people supporting them with different things compared to an agency coming in providing that personal care at points in time. The support is really co-designed, it's local, it keeps money local, as I said before, loads of different things, but at the end of the day, for me, the thing that really matters it makes a difference to people's lives. And I'll just go back to a bit of a case study. This also cycles back to my commissioners, so commissioner hat and provider hat on both at the same time. The micro provider programme that I commissioned in Somerset was a long-term project. It started as a concept, an idea. We had a little bit of funding that we put in. We worked alongside Community Catalysts, absolutely in partnership, to harness their expertise, their knowledge, their skill set, alongside our experience and our skill set in our community, brought those two things together. And what happened was this catalyst of opportunity. And over a long time, through that investment of time and patience and sheer determination, we have now got a thriving community enterprise landscape in Somerset that is completely embedded in all elements of adult social care. So it supports people before they really need it, if you like. So within the community, it also supports people who have long-term care needs. It supports people coming out of hospital. And there are now, so this was last July when I left, but there are now just over 1,000 providers in Somerset. They provide 6,000 plus hours of care every week to individuals. It's created over 800 jobs now, and it has resulted in much better outcomes for the people of Somerset. And this is just this is the diagram that illustrates that. We did some surveys with people who had experienced care through agencies, if you like, through traditional support and through micro providers, and the difference in what they report is quite stark. So just to round it back, anything is possible. My advice as a commissioner and as a provider is dream big. You need to invest the time to rethink what is needed. So break out of those silos. Think differently, come back from that, think what is it that you would want. I mean, I know this is something that drives me right now. I have parents and parents-in-law who are both in need of some care and support. And I have to say that it's not a fun place for them to be, and trying to crack through and identify care that will work for them is really, really hard. It always focuses on their deficits. Any of the questions that we get from when we touch those systems, it doesn't focus on the people, what it is, you know, their years and years of life experience, what makes them joyous, why they enjoy life. So those are the things that I think it's really important for us to hang on to. What is it that we want for ourselves, for our parents, for our friends? Is what we have now good enough? And I would say, looking across the country, I go into, you know, I speak to people like yourselves every single day, and I always have this this conversation. And very often the answer is it's not good enough, and we need to think differently. We need to think bigger and better. Whenever we go into a community, we go into an area though, as a provider, as Comcats, you know, we find some great stuff. It's just hiding. It's out there, but it's hiding. And a lot of our role is to help bring that stuff into the light, to connect it together and to enable it to be part of a very vibrant and exciting marketplace. And there's lots of evidence that this works. And I know from experience as a commissioner and also as a provider that there are loads and loads of willing people in your communities and organisations that are out there that can help. And I think my final message really is that commissioning can enable all of this, but only if you let it. Okay. That's it from me. So thank you for listening. I wonder if you've got any questions.
Thank you very much, Pip, for an inspirational talk. And I've made lots of notes. I was scribbling away while you were talking, and I think there's lots of things that ring a bell, and about basically designing what people want. Is and I think it was good for you to link back to the presentation we'd had from Anne, because that was all about what she enjoys doing.
Indeed, yeah.
Yes.
And that's the same, isn't it? We're all, you know, at the end of the day, I think sometimes as professionals we forget that we are, you know, our business is people, and you know, it's really important that we focus on the things that are important.
Right. So before, I've got some hands up, but before I bring them in, can I just ask you about the time scale? You talked about the moment when you realised doing the same thing over and over again wasn't going to produce what's needed. Over what time scale did this change happen in Somerset?
So the initial project, if you like, I did a sort of a 6-month pilot in one particular geography. So I took the west part of Somerset, which is our moorland area, and focused there to begin with, because that's where we had some particular issues. It just wasn't working at all. So used one team and one area. So a 6-month project. At the end of that, we kind of got some really good ingredients, and then started to roll that out. At the end of that 6-month period, there was some marked difference in behaviours, in ways of working and in outcomes for people. And we'd started to get a skeleton idea of what it was, and we'd started to get some returns, if you like, in terms of the wait lists were coming down, the number of assessments we were doing was reducing massively, etc. So some inklings were there within 6 months. But in terms of time, it's a long time. You know, the micro provider programme took 5 years, I would say, before it started to really make a difference to the system. We were still fighting, you know, during that 5 years, different parts of the system, and it was, you know, and even now it's really, you still have to keep on top of it. You still have to keep reminding people why we're doing this, what the importance part of it is. But after 5 years, we were able to demonstrate at least £500,000 direct savings to adult social care and over £2 million of savings to the adult social care system as a whole, including the healthcare system. And I think, you know, the whole of the transformation across Somerset, Yeah, it probably took at least 3 to 4 years for us to start to see, because you have to change everything. It's about the conversation at the front door. I spent a lot of time with our contact centre as well, changing that part, working with the community agents, building that network of VCSE organisations so that that was all linked in, making sure that micro providers were networked into all of that. Social workers understood it all. So yeah, it took time. 3 to 5 years. I would say that now when I'm advising people about who are interested in taking up local area coordination, which is our equivalent of the village agent scheme or our micro provider program, I say, you know, we initially have a 2-year program, but that's scratching the surface. That's to set up the system for success. If you really want this to succeed, you need to invest in it for 3 to 5 years and really promote it. You have to, and that you have to keep doing that. It doesn't, you know, once you stop, that I'd say that the compass pulls back to the traditional process quite quickly, and we started to see that across the country at the beginning of the pandemic. You know, how many people, you know, despite knowing that sending people home from hospital into a care home wasn't the right thing to do, how many people did it? You know, it happened across the country.
Right, thanks very much, Pip. Right, I've got Councillor Lynn Riley first, and then Gary Cliff. So Lynn.
Oh, Pip, you wonderful woman. You are just music to my ears. I can't tell you how inspiring it was to hear you talk about you know, different approaches and the real impact that has on lives. It was really quite moving on occasions. Just a couple of questions, if I may, about you know, how you manage that transition from a very traditional commissioning model to that micro commissioning model. Ironically, on my way to work this morning, I was having this very conversation with one of our local care providers in the car park at the station this morning. So it's quite timely for me. So I'd be interested in how you made, you know, that tradition being a marathon, not a sprint, but also you know, if you could sort of tease out what the culture was in Somerset that basically prepared the ground for you to be able to make that quite significant transition, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you're absolutely right. So we had a traditional commissioning process, very procurement led, very price led, and I'd say the things that broke that enabled that are sheer determination. I am not one, you know, I'm not a shrinking violet. And I just, you know, so that you have to have someone that's prepared to put their head above the parapet to start that process. Or that's certainly what I had to do. I had to really put myself, you know, up there and say, look, I'll do this. Give me the opportunity. I had a brilliant DAS, a new opportunity. A new DAS came in. It was Stephen Chandler, who you probably know, who is the chair of ADAS at the moment. And you know, literally on day one, I knocked on his door and said, let me do something. This is making my heart bleed. I need to change something. Wow. So having that permission from a senior leader was critical. He watched my back. He gave me the space to do stuff. He allowed failure, if you like, and I think that's really important. You know, it was. So we described it, I mean, it makes me sad because the person I worked with on this unfortunately passed away last year. She was the team leader in West Somerset, and Chris was my social worker dream lady. She was really up for the challenge. She was just about to retire and she said, no, Pip, I'm going to work with you on this. This matters. I believe in this. And that was important too. So working side by side, operational commissioning, forgetting our hats, but actually putting people at the front of this. So Chris and I, we often have these, and I've got it now, the goosebump moments, and that's what drove us. So it's about putting people first, not process first, and having that thing. And we described it as we put ourselves into a bubble and we just said, look, you lot can do what you want out there. We're going to do the right thing. We're going to focus on the right thing. And by focusing on the right thing, we found that the money followed anyway, that the right things happen. it was hard work. I had to spend a lot of time persuading my procurement friends that I was doing the right thing, my legal friends that I was doing the right thing. But I had Stephen supporting me with that. I knew that, you know, if I needed him, I could call him in. I didn't have to very often, but when I needed to. And then the other key thing I think that enables this is data is my friend. I use data a lot. So even getting some stories, some really positive things that were going on, sharing people's accounts of the difference it was making from all perspectives. So staff, the people that we were supporting, community leaders going, my God, we're actually being involved. You're actually listening to what we do and recognising it and thinking it's great. So all of those things, bringing those into the council so that the council leaders heard it. I got the member on board for adult social care so that they knew about it and they were championing it. And I think using data, just also the hard data, that look, it's making a difference to your key indicators. And I only use 2 or 3 indicators because I'm not too bothered about most of them. Is it making a difference? Assessment, you know, we shouldn't have people waiting. Why are we assessing people? Why are we focused on assessing? We should be talking to people. Yes, we should be having really good conversations with people. Do we need to assess them in that process? Is it not better that we find solutions for them? So actually, a lot of my, you know, working at the contact centre, for example, we cut up the script, stopped the script, pulled away from that, and basically just gave them permission again to just talk to people and to put things in place so that people had a solution and weren't moved into crisis. So yeah, I guess a lot of it is, and I use small amounts. So to go back to the micro commissioning, to get the relationship in place that I needed with Comcats in place, it was a small amount of money. It was an invest to save. I mean, at Comcats we have a business case that we help other authorities to do this with. It's a small amount of investment to just get it going, and that's what it is. It's that sort of using some money. But I would say that always I was looking at, but this has to be in the real budget at some point. It can't be, if it's a side project. You know, even yesterday I was talking to another organisation who said, you know, well, we've had some great successes with our, you know, this different way of working. This was family group conferencing. It works. We know it works for children. We know it can work for adults. We want it, but we've tried it. It's been piloted. We've had great research outcomes, and then the budget's cut because it wasn't fixed in one of those proper budgets. So, you know, that's, I think, is the important thing.
Thanks, Pip. Gary Cliff, our voluntary person from the voluntary sector. I'm sure you've got a comment, Gary.
Sure. Yeah, sure enough, Val. Yeah, as everybody else said, Pip, fantastic. What I also think is fantastic is this is the second time, third or fourth time we've been hearing this message from different people. You know, we've got our own NDTI program going on, which is just starting in Ellesmere Port, which is a 3-year program, which is saying exactly the same thing. It's almost like you've copied each other's slides. And I've been in a meeting with social workers where that conversation has been started with Lee, with, you know, and I know I've had a conversation with Charlotte, who's the director. You know, we've got Val here, who's the member responsible for it. We're all on the same page.
Indeed.
Which is a fantastic place to start. So just a couple of observations and a couple of questions. Yeah, you went from being a commissioner to being an enabler. I think that's one of the key things that I've just picked up. And you talked about investing to save. And I think that's exactly as, and the point you just made about once a pilot ends, you've got to fix it in the mainstream. Definitely. I think, you know, I don't know if anybody's taking minutes of that from what we're all saying, but, you know, it's absolutely crucial. And it's about trust. And you talked about building trust in the organisations, and I love the idea of your village agents. I'd love to talk about exactly how that works and who they were. But yeah, let me not lose my place. So building trust, absolutely important. Investing time. That's one of the other things at the moment, that we are having the odd meeting, but you can tell everybody's sort of like waiting to get back to the day job, and, you know, momentum can be lost. So I think we really do need to somehow find a way to build time. And yeah, you know, absolutely. You talked about creating hyperlocal activities. So I'll move on to my questions. How did you create hyperlocal activities? How did you create a micro provider program? So one question, and just a second but related question. I'm interested in terms of always think about funding, don't we? What percentage of funding do you think got transferred from traditional type care to these micro providers or voluntary community faith sector organisations? You know, what sort of percentage of money did you transfer over? And that's probably enough for now.
Okay. Interesting. Good questions. Really good questions. So I'll tackle them as I remember them, and you might have to re-prompt me, Gary. But so first of all, how do we do the hyperlocal? Both as a commissioner and now as a provider, I'll talk from a Comcast perspective. So we work with local authorities to create the right environment to enable that. So what we do is we employ a local person that we call a catalyst, and that's their role. They go out there and they work with the local communities, they work with the local VCSE, and they catalyse the situation. So they will have conversations in the local communities, finding people and supporting people to set up organisations. So this is, and we have a methodology for doing that, an approach that we've been using for, and we've been sort of honing for the last 11 years that we know works. So and that's the process that we used in Somerset as well. So just so you're aware, it's exactly that, and it's and yeah, it works. So this is about not us as a if you like a national organisation doing two. This is very much about working with the local conditions, environment, people, and we just inject the catalyst, and the catalyst helps to spark stuff up. And when it's hyperlocal, I mean, I can give you some really good examples, and this is where the micro enterprise catalyst works really well with coordinators, be those village agents, local area coordinators, social prescribers, that connecting role within a community, if you like. If you get those two people working together, that's when the magic really happens, because someone that's having the conversation with people who have a need within their community. So let's say one of my village agents in Somerset, they sort of identify that Mrs. Jones, was struggling, and the house was in a bad state, and there was a hoarding issue or whatever. Rather than that going to some national organisation to come in, clean, go away, and guess what, 6 months later you've got the same problem, and you come in, you clean, you go away, because you haven't sorted the problem, you've just fixed the situation. The local coordinator or village agent has, walks alongside that person, and then goes and finds someone locally, asks the local community, your neighbour needs some help, is anybody able to offer some help? Some people will volunteer, and some people will say, yeah, absolutely, and I can do that on an ongoing basis, so you've got consistency. So what you build is that community around a person. And so anyone that wants to set up as a micro, they then be introduced to the catalyst. The catalyst then helps to set them up as a business, and they're the person there that's then properly walking alongside that person, as well as the village agent. So you're creating these networks around a person, and guess what we get then is we get a situation where the whole community is wrapped around the situation as well, and supportive of the situation, understanding of the issue. Quite often people that need care and support are ostracized, isolated in society, but by knitting stuff together like this, you create a supportive community as well. So that's the hyperlocal bit.
So great. Can I just ask before you answer the second one, just because interestingly you talked about neighbours and circles of friendship and all that, but I think you mentioned the fact you actually pay. I think you mentioned the fact you pay neighbours.
Yeah.
How on earth did you get that through commissioners?
Well, that's what micro providers are, because they set up as a business. What you've got out there at the moment is lots of people providing care and support to neighbours, haven't we? We've seen a lot of that going on. What we also have in a lot of our communities across the country is people that need to earn a little bit of money as well. We all need a roof over our own heads, and we need to be able to feed ourselves. So if there's an opportunity to earn money from that, that means that I might then go into care as a job, as opposed to it just being something I do on the side, or I do to support one or two people. People want to care for other people, and a lot of people would love to be a carer, but actually the care and the conditions and what have you for working for an agency isn't what they want to do. They don't like the way of working, they don't like the pay, etc. So yes, what we provide is an opportunity for people to be a carer, but under their own terms, their own conditions, it's very flexible working, and you can get paid for it, and you can get paid at a better rate than you would if you were working for an agency. So it's a proper wage.
Well, I'm a serial entrepreneur, Pip, and I want to set that business up here. So talk to me later and we'll do it.
Indeed. Brilliant.
So yeah, the second one was in terms of percentage of money transferring between the traditional and those sort of
so not enough, Gary, is the answer, because it's, I think this, over time the system starts to use, so in Somerset, for example, now it, as part of, if you like, the conversation around putting together support around a person, in that sort of peer forum way, which is the CLS way, which I'm absolutely embedded in. I used to be a CLS person as well. So all of that, that is now one of the considerations. Is it what's the right support for this person? Is there a micro? If not, do we go out and look for one, or is it that they want an agency because that suits them, or what is it? So a lot of personal budgets, so direct payments went up, so there was a 40% lift in direct payment usage, so that moves money into the community and into different care. So that in many ways, that's how the money moves, if you like. The more you move away from block contracts, and the more you move to personalised budgets, direct payments, ISFs, that gives the flexibility. That's the thing that changes the momentum. Within Somerset, I did increase the amount of money going into the community sector, and worked, in collaboration with the CCG to make sure that money was, bigger. And we probably increased that by about 50% in the time that we were there, but it's still a fraction of the overall budget. And I would still, I would argue that it needs to be more, but at the same time, for me, a lot of it is about that moving to personal budgets, enabling people to be able to, manage, control their own situation. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Pip. That's great. Right.
Thank you, Pip. I can see, Lynn, that you want to come. I think you want to come back, but I'm going to bring Councillor Lewis in first, and then come back to you. And if we could just take 5 more minutes, because we have Ben Andrews to speak as well. So thanks, Gina.
Yeah, Pip, you mentioned working with the CCG. Mm-hmm. I'm a governor at one of our local hospitals. Yep. And obviously budgets are now changing through the introduction of integrated care partnerships and so on. Mm-hmm. Do you see that being a difficulty? That's the first question. And in terms of convincing people to allow their neighbours in, I recently watched a couple of programmes where the situation you described, an elderly person with some disabilities, the house was absolutely filthy. I've never seen anything like what was shown on screen. And they were hoarders. And what they provided, the people who went in, they did do the work that you said. They dealt with the situation, but they also worked with the neighbours. Now, it was purely in a voluntary sense. One of the things that does concern me is, what do you do about DBS checking? And also, you're putting people in a situation where they perhaps have never been before, because you're talking about self-employment. Mm-hmm. So, how do you actually manage that situation? When I was self-employed after I retired from teaching, the paperwork was incredible. I learned very fast, but it's a pile of work that perhaps these people are also, because they're neighbours, they may also be of a similar age or, similar facilities. So 2 things: how do we move the money within the integrated care partnerships? And also, how do we deal with DBS checks and somebody becoming self-employed?
Yeah, okay, so the first one, absolutely essential that the whole system is engaged in this. That's something that we as Community Catalyst work really hard at. So if we were to come in and to help you support to develop a micro provider environment, we would put into a change group members of the CCG, members of the NHS board, so that you've got that whole ICP, ICS engaged in this, because for me it is really important. So we spent a lot of time in Somerset, and we spend a lot of time in other parts of the systems that we work in around the whole country, having those conversations with commissioners in CCG, so that personal health budgets are part of this solution as well. So, you know, the money can, we've got the evidence, it's happened in other places, so there's a pathway there, and for me it's essential, because at the end of the day, let's go back to the thing that drives me is it's about people. It shouldn't be about budgets, it shouldn't be about organizations, it should be about people. So let's do the right thing. So that's that. In terms of the other thing, risk, yeah, there's a risk to everything. Every day we have risk, and I think, you know, people going into people's houses is a risk, whether they've got a uniform on and they come from an agency, or whether they are someone within the community. And when I say neighbours, it's not always someone that you know, it might be that you didn't know that person before, but it is someone within your community. I'd say managed, you know, of the 1,000 people in Somerset that are a micro provider, and the many tens of thousands across the UK that we have employed, there hasn't been a significant safeguarding issue at all. In Somerset, we removed 2 people from the list. We didn't stop them practicing, but we just said, look, you're not part of our scheme because, you know, your way of working isn't in line with our way of working. So we have standards. We are very clear what those standards are. Everyone is DBS checked. If people say that they want to provide X, Y, or Z, then they must be skilled, experienced, or have qualifications in X, Y, and Z. So people must work, you know, it's about transparency. It's about being honest and open about what they can and can't do. They need to get the right training, etc. It's also where our expertise comes in. So we work with the CCG. We also, not CCG, CQC. We also work with departments of health and social care, and also make sure that people, if they are going to be registered as self-employed, which is what micros are, then we help people through that process. And it isn't for everyone. You're absolutely right, Dina. Not everybody wants to be self-employed, and for those people, there are other opportunities. You know, they may want to join a care agency. I think what we're doing is we're opening up the market and just saying, if people do want to be self-employed, we can help make it as easy as possible. We network people together so that they're supporting each other. They're not isolated on their own. So in Somerset, there are 12 to 15 different networks of micros who all sort of support each other, peer support, supported by the Catalyst, so that on an ongoing basis, and we set that up wherever we go. So it's not that sort of isolated self-employed, it's part of a system. And I go back to, for me, the key things are being connected. You really only unlock the power of the micros if they're fully connected to each other, to the system, and to people within their community. And I go back, I'll finish with risk. Risk is something that, you know, every time I mention micros and throughout my whole career, whenever I sort of talked about these different ways of working, involving the communities more, people go, oh, but isn't that really risky? Is it? You know, if I don't know about you, but every community I've lived in, and I've moved many times, and I live in a rural place now, and people know what's going on. And actually, if you're working in your local area, and our micros tend to work within a 2 to 3 mile radius, that's it. People know what's going on. It's, for me, it's eyes and ears. And just let me give you one story. One of my friends is a micro in this community here, and she was supposed to be popping in to see me for a cup of tea one time, and she said, look, I can't. One of the ladies that I support has just gone into hospital, and I just want to go over to her house. I want to just clean it all up. I want to make sure it's all nice for when she gets home, and I want to make sure there's stuff in the fridge for when she gets home, and then I want to go and visit her. Now, none of that was paid time. She wasn't going to go and charge the lady for that. That was all just because actually she's one of my ladies, you know, she's part of my community. So yes, I get paid for certain things, but this is the difference between being paid for time and task and actually being paid for these lovely things we called outcomes. Actually, what she's, you know, she recognised she gets paid a certain amount of money to help the people that she works with. but actually the returns are much greater than that because communities support communities, don't they?
Yes, they do. Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks,
That
Gina and
kindness.
Pip. Lynn, one short question, please. And Pip, a quick
right,
answer, please, this time, because
Okay,
we do
I'll
need
go
to move
short.
on to Ben.
Okay, quick question. Pooled budgets with health. Did you get there?
No, not necessarily. No.
Did you get
yeah.
pooled resource?
Yes.
Perfect. Right. Can we
Yes,
speak
yes.
outside
Okay,
this meeting?
Thanks, Lynn, for that quick question. And now I am going to move on, and I hope you'll stay with us, Pip, in case there's further discussion. And welcome Ben Andrews from Empower You. Ben, thank you. Thank you for waiting, and looking forward to your presentation.
Lovely, thanks for that. I'm really interested in that, and some good links into what I'm about to present. So I'll just get the PowerPoint up. So thanks for having me along. My name is Ben Andrews and I'm Managing Director of Beyond Empower, and we are a community interest company helping places do it differently to support healthy, active lives for disabled people. We're a fairly new organisation. We offer a range of products and services to work towards that mission. The one I'm going to talk about today is Empower You, and more specifically our journey of taking the idea for Empower You and working towards a commissioned service, which is the stage we're at now. So the first part of Empower You actually started with my own lived experience, and I think this sort of reflects the importance of that lived experience, the insight and perspective you get from that. So I have a condition called retinitis pigmentosa, which involves the rapid deterioration of my retina. It's an hereditary condition, so something to share with my mum and my granddad. It basically involves a loss of vision over time. So I grew up with my mum being blind, and growing up with these type of conditions, or I suppose any type of difference in this way, you become quite in tune to the many barriers, particularly community settings, present to you. So, and this become really apparent at age 17 when I really started getting into fitness. And I would go along to the local gym with my mum and my dad and my brother. And as you can imagine, navigating a gym environment with a visual impairment isn't easy. There's maybe not to this extreme, but there's weights left all over. There's no very little audio description on machines, and staff aren't always trained to support people. But what we found as a family in engaging with these type of spaces, over time, people naturally become more aware of how to support you. So weights were moved out the way. If you looked a bit uncertain about how to use machines, and people come over to support, and staff become more supportive and better equipped to help us within these environments. And as a family, we've always engaged in these places, so it was quite normal for us. But I started to reflect at about age 17 that not everybody might have these opportunities or might need support to access these places to support good health and well-being. So I started volunteering around Salford, assessing what was available for disabled people to be active and access what they wanted to locally, specifically inclusive opportunities, so disabled and non-disabled people doing things together as we as a family always had. And I found it to be a real lack of opportunities out there for that. I found a lot of segregated provision or specialist services for disabled people, very little that was inclusive. And this wasn't specific to Salford, this was something that was a national issue. So from there, I went on to Salford University and I studied exercise and health sciences for 3 years, and built up a case around the importance of disabled people being able to access community spaces as a means to divert demand away from NHS, social care and statutory type services. On leaving Salford University, I had all of my learning there and a bit of a business case in its very early stages for what was to become Empower You. And I submitted this to NHS Salford CCG's Innovation Fund. And this was a small pot of grant funding which enabled people, or I wouldn't say people, it's more organisations or companies to pilot new ideas to support the health and well-being of Salford residents. And as I wasn't a company at the time, this was one of the barriers that I experienced. I had to be employed and incubated by another company to enable me to deliver Empower You. So NHS Salford CCG said that they really liked the proposal and they could see the benefit of it. So they give me a small investment to pilot Empower You. Alongside the investment was also given some business case support, and I'd say that was more important than the actual investment, because they were putting resource in to help us develop a business case for the offer to support the sustainability of it long term, so it wasn't dependent on grant funding. And it just so happened that our business case was aligned with NHS Salford CCG, so we was working towards those becoming our main commissioner. So we piloted it in the Broughton area of Salford, and NHS Salford CCG liked this. This was between 2015 2016, and then because they liked the outcomes, we then spread it to the Pendleton, Eccles and Swinton areas of Salford. Everything was going really well. We then went up for commissioning, and at this point, even with a business case that NHS Salford CCG has developed for us, we actually got refused for commissioning, because at the time this was only a one-to-one approach with people working with disabled people, and because we wasn't getting enough numbers through the door, the cost savings weren't high enough. But they did leave the door open and said, if you can come back to us and you've piloted a group-based approach, then this could be an investable proposition. So Empower You went a bit quiet for a few months, and then I presented at an event, and Trafford Council got in touch and asked if we would come and deliver Empower You in Trafford area for a year period with a group-based approach. So we went over to Trafford. We thought that was a real good opportunity to pilot Empower You across the whole locality in Trafford using a group-based approach, and then take that back to NHS Salford CCG for commissioning. And that's exactly what happened. So in 2020, we was commissioned on long-term 3 to 5 year contracts in both Salford and Trafford to deliver Empower You. And we've now basically got a drag and drop model, which can be replicated in any locality, to work with communities to support disabled people to lead active lifestyles. So we're now commissioned in Trafford through Trafford Council, Salford CCG, which is a combined budget. So it's NHS Salford CCG is a primary commissioner, but it's supported, it's through the integrated budget between Salford Council. And we're also commissioned with Active Tameside to deliver Empower You in Tameside through a social care subcontract to help their day services move towards more community-based approaches. And what we basically commissioned for in each locality is to increase a community's capacity to support disabled people within mainstream provision. So trying to support disabled people away from needing access to specialist providers all the time. So the way our approach works is we initially engage with disabled people, groups or individuals, and we support them to identify activities of interest. So we don't go to them with an offer. They tell us what they want from us. Once we've identified that, we then go out into the community and we find activities locally, not opting for anything specialist, but working with what's available. That could be a walking group, a running group, a social club. It could be at a pub. Whatever people come to us with, and we work with the providers of those activities to upskill them, whether that's training, whether it's providing them with some support to make reasonable adjustments to the activity, easy read gym programs, accessible walking routes, whatever it is that the group or individual that we've engaged with initially need, and any gaps that the provider might have to provide in that inclusive provision, we support that. We're then there for 8 weeks. And really that 8 weeks is used to build up a relationship between local disabled people and the provider of the activity, both of whom before this wouldn't have been likely to engage in most cases. So it's a bit of a learning curve there. And we also use this time to build up confidence, motivation, and establish a bit of a routine of engagement for the group to access these activities. From there, by the end of the 8 weeks, what we're hopeful is that the provider is able to take greater ownership of providing inclusive provision for disabled people, and the group who've expressed an interest in engaging are now better equipped to attend. Another point that I've just skipped past is just touching on Pip's point around creating that broader network of support. Every person who goes through the programme or group also has a buddy, and that could be a family, friend, neighbour, carer, support staff, and they go along on this journey with them to the activities. So it sort of replaces traditional caring responsibilities, which has been good because it's helped develop relationships aside from what's perceived as traditional caring. So after 8 weeks, we then take a step back, and then we're checking at 3 months and 12 months. And as I've said, the ideal is that we're able to take a step back and people are able to maintain their activity independently, whatever it might be. So at the minute, after 3 months, we've got 82% of people maintaining their activity levels 3 months beyond Empower You, and that drops slightly to 78% maintaining their activity levels after 1 year. So really good sustainability rates there. And we also capture the impact that it has on activity providers. So 85% feel they were better equipped to work with disabled people since engaging with Empower You. And just a bit of a quote there from Jacob, boxing coach, who now in theory is providing some social care support through boxing sessions on a regular basis, and just the impact that working with Empower You has had on him. And before, Andy wasn't very comfortable in working with disabled people. He was scared of saying the wrong thing. And it's just a shame how small little barriers like that can get in the way of disabled people being able to access these types of opportunities, and how something so little as providing a boxing session to disabled people can help both sides overcome that. An impact for activity providers. So most activity providers see on average a 1,200% increase in the number of disabled people engaged. And I also think that just reflects how little we might be utilising all of what's available in a person's locality to provide social care. So lasting impact. So just to end on a bit of a case study. So this is a social care provider we work with in Salford called Aspire, and they support people with a range of different learning disabilities and physical disabilities. We met with one of their health and wellbeing groups, supporting them to identify activities. They said they wanted to start walking, they wanted to start going to the gym, and they wanted to start gardening. So then it was up to us to go out and find an allotment group, which we did, and we supported the allotment group to get in some raised beds and provided them with some training, and then supported the group to access it, so they was able to maintain their own independent allotment long term. We identified a local walking group and upskilled their staff, and helped to identify the more accessible walking routes in their area, and they were able to link into that group then. And we negotiated some discounted passes with a local gym in return for some training with the gym staff, and they were then able to access gym and swimming sessions on a regular basis. So this is going from being completely building based from 10 till 3 to not even going to the day service anymore, meeting up at the gym with the friends, skipping over to gardening, and then going for a walk afterwards. So it's gone from building to accessing whatever they wanted within their community. So in the context of social care, I suppose what Empower You does is supports disabled people to access mainstream provision away from more specialist and costly interventions. And I think key there is that a lot of the activities that we're supporting people into, they're often happy to pay for, because it's not perceived as traditional social care. It's a gym pass, or it's £2 to start a running group, or buy some equipment for gardening. So because it's more activity led, people seem more willing to use their own finances for it. And in turn, it also improves their health and well-being. It upskills the untapped social care workforce in local activity providers and community-based staff. So there's vast numbers of social care workers out there who don't necessarily have to be specialists, because they're not providing that specialist support, but are able to support people who would traditionally access social care. So how can we really utilise those assets in the community? And it also supports current social care providers who might have a hard time adapting and adjusting to community-based approaches, because they've been so used to building-based support and providing that, to take a more community-based approach. And we've actually been recognised as a top tip for doing that by ADAS Northwest in their recent top tips for moving away from building-based support. So as I said at the start, this was really, as well as sort of talking a bit about Empower You, a bit about the journey from moving from an idea of lived experience through to commissioning. So what I'd say is start small and progress slowly. Small investments, new ideas, expand, and as I said, it doesn't always work out the first time, so you might have to invest again and go again. Support beyond financing, so the business case side of NHS Salford CCG support was equal to or more important than the actual investment what it give us, and it's still an investment in their time, but it helped a more sustainable service than that they end up investing in long term anyway through commissioning. And it also always felt like a partnership. It didn't feel transactional. It wasn't, we've given you this money, we're holding you to these outcomes. It was very much about learning, piloting, and it very much felt like a partnership throughout. We didn't have meetings to review KPIs. It was learning reviews. What are we learning through this? How can we use to improve it? And I think that relationship was really important. And the final point is around just sticking with it. As Pip said, this is culture change what you're working towards, and that does take a while, 2 to 5 years, even up to 7 years for some people have posed that period as well. So stick with it, and change will happen. So that's it from me. Thanks for listening, and if anyone's got any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you very much, Ben, for another inspirational presentation. And I really like your focus on inclusive activities, but the sustainability of it through training these providers to be more inclusive and open. And the work you're doing for that sounds really interesting. And I note that we have with us in the meeting our access officer who works with our Corporate Disability Access Forum. And so we will certainly be having some interesting discussions following your presentation. So for questions, I have Councillor Riley. I think. Are you on mute, Lynn? I think we might have lost her, but Gary Cliff does have a question while we wait for Lynn. Gary.
Thank you.
And I'm not sure Lynn's hand ever went down, Chair. So it may be a legacy hand.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, no, I'd just love to ask you a question, Ben, about, again, a great presentation, great set of ideas, and a really new way of looking at it. I'm getting old and in the tooth, but I've loved both the presentations this morning. Have made me think of new things, which is always really, really good. You talked about drag and drop. Just in a second, that's my first question. Can you just explain what drag and drop meant a little bit more?
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
But no. I think it's a fascinating way of describing what I think it probably is. But the other, it's what I loved was that an untapped social care workforce, and that's what we're all desperate for. You know, we've had presentations saying we're struggling for, you know, for people that are working. But as you quite rightly say, we have got untapped people. My own, you know, personal situation. You know, I've got an autistic stepson who goes to all the time, goes to boxing clubs and to, you know, martial arts clubs. And you're right. It's a question of those people really do want to engage, and they do want to. They're glad to provide that service. So I think you're right. I think we can talk to lots more individual organisations and help them become part of the social care workforce. I think that's absolutely fantastic. And yeah, the other, again, if anybody's, I don't know if Morgan's taking minutes or obviously he's recording this, but not holding, you're not being held to account, I think, is one of those other things, isn't it? And we're getting there locally in terms of commissioning. We're certainly having conversations about, you know, not necessarily all being about KPI and performance management, but about learning. But I think that's certainly from a commission point of view, you know, this overall commission, I think it's something we need to take away and learn from. And yeah, no, just generally, I think it's a really fantastic service you're offering, and it's a really good thing. Thank you very much for presenting this morning.
Yeah, no problem at all. So we just to point out, we are held a bit more to KPIs now. It's a commission service rather than a pilot. But in the early pilot stage, it was important just to create the space to make mistakes and develop and help that along, despite there being a bit of investment and resource attached to that. So in terms of the drag and drop model, it's basically now wherever Empower is needed. So Salford and Trafford, for example, are quite different areas from a socioeconomic perspective. But the model can still be applied in each area. So whenever there's a need to support disabled people to access more mainstream provision, sort of, it's not the only solution. There's other options out there, but Empower You is now basically being able to be lifted from one area to another to support that agenda. And absolutely around the untapped social care workforce. And what you find is that a lot of activity providers or community-based providers out there are once you've had the support, are receptive to working with disabled people, because from their point of view, it's a new market, and disabled people want to spend the money with these providers. So it means more footfall, more income, more memberships for these type of spaces. So it's out. We sort of satisfying two agendas. There's some alignment there, and it's just we sort of have to, been described in the past as sort of a broker service to just bring those different groups together.
Yeah, no, fascinating and ideal. And again, from our commission, overall commission point of view, it'll be interesting to have a conversation about how much would we expect people to pay for the services that are provided in a social care environment, and whether or not we actually start to talk about that as a model, or whether or not that's, no, hang on a minute, that's, you know, trying to just save money all the time. But no, yeah, no, thanks very much, Ben. Very interesting.
Cheers, Gary.
Thank you, Ben. I've got just one question from Gina Lewis, and then we will take a 5-minute break for coffee or tea. Gina.
Pardon me.
A very quick question, Ben. Obviously, within any community, there are lots of people who do things. If I look at my area of Winsford, we have a very active boxing club. We have the ranger who does walks. He also does things like hedge laying and so on. So, I mean, I think one of the biggest problems we've got is giving people the information about what's available within the community. As a local councillor, I often get calls from people, both with disabilities and from the older generation. There's nothing for me to do. There's nowhere for me to go. And how did you actually publicise what's available? Because I think that communication is going to be the key.
Yeah. So we do share things with people, but we don't. We're basically led by the groups and individuals that we meet. So we're not aware of sort of everything that's going on in an area because we don't come across those things until they're requested. So we're sort of that bit of hand-holding support to access them. I think for some disabled people, one of the issues that we found is, and it goes back to my first point around the expectation of segregated provision, disabled people will sometimes expect there to be, this is a disability swim, or this is a disability boxing session. And when they don't see those types of prompts, then they start saying there's nothing in the community available to me. When that might be the case for now, but with a bit of training and upskilling and support of the activity providers, those more mainstream sessions can become more inclusive for disabled people, so they can access anything in the locality, whether it's targeted to disabled people or not. So it's an ongoing issue around the sharing of information, and there's some fantastic directories out there that need updating on a regular basis, but we've not really found a way to articulate that aside from if we meet a group or individual, then we go out and find the activities sort of thing. So it's very much led by them rather than a presentation of here's what's available locally and now you go out and access it sort of thing.
Right. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Sorry, Ben, could you just ask you to stop sharing your screen, please, just so we can see everyone's faces more clearly?
Oh, my sharing.
Thank
Sorry about that. I've not realised. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Ben, for that presentation. And I think there's lots of positive comments that I've just picked up in the chat for what you're doing and interest in it. But I would like now to take a short break because it is quite a long meeting and we've had some really excellent presentations this morning, starting with Anne's and then Community Catalyst and your own. So I make it 11:35. So if we could come back at 11:40, please. It's a very quick break. And then Charlotte Walton is with us to talk about what's happening in Cheshire West. So thank you very much indeed, Ben and our other speakers. Right, see you at 11:40. it's not really possible to tell whether everybody's back. And I know that was a very quick break for people. So we'll just give a few more minutes, and Charlotte's loading her presentation, which is good. I think it's 11:41 now, so let's make a start and say welcome to Charlotte Walton, our Director of Adult Services in Cheshire West. And thank you for coming this morning, Charlotte, to talk to us about developments in Cheshire West. So can I pass over to you?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Armstrong. And I'm also joined by Matt Emerson, who's our Head of Service for Commissioning and Contracts in the Council, and obviously can help with any discussion and questions following the presentation. So we go to the next slide, Amy. Okay, so I mean, this morning we've had fantastic presentations from Anne, Pip and Ben, and hopefully really reinforces the approach that we're trying to take here in Cheshire West, and knits together beautifully, I know, some of the themes and discussions that have happened in the previous sessions. So commissioning as an activity is a cyclical process. And critically, it's about ensuring that people have the right services to meet their needs and have a good life. And if we're not achieving those outcomes and that's not where we get to, then we're not achieving anything meaningful through commissioning. But we also, through the Care Act, have a very clear statutory duty as a local authority to facilitate a diverse, sustainable, high quality market. And I think what we've heard this morning is the importance of that word diverse. And I think that's something that is really important that we hold on to, and that it's about the whole local population. So it includes those who pay for their own care or support, as well as those who have services funded and provided through the local authority. And it's about supporting the market as a whole. And again, this morning we've heard about a very, very diverse and an opportunistic market that we can refer to. Next slide, Amy. So in terms of our approach to commissioning, there are four sort of key stages, and we've heard some of this already this morning. Critically around strategic planning. And I'll touch towards the end around our greater opportunities for integration with health, with the development of the integrated care system and so forth. But we've got real opportunity to take a more joined up strategic approach to planning, to looking at need, understanding policy and legislation, and obviously always having to take into consideration finance and resources. But the most important element, and again, we've spoken about this and heard about this in previous sessions and today, is the co-production and co-design. And we've made a real strong commitment in our very first session around adult social care visioning, and heard the importance, I think probably play throughout every one of these sessions, the importance and commitment of us co-producing, of us listening. We heard from Anne right at the start of this session, and if we're not hearing from people who are in receipt of services, our local communities and population, organisations and companies providing services in helping us to develop and design how we move forward, then we're going to miss what's important and what matters. And it's beyond service user and client engagement. That's a part of it, but we have to be really clear about co-producing. And we also have the elements of formal consultation, and we do an awful lot of formal consultation, but the key is to be sure that we always capture the voice and hear from the people who matter and who are impacted and can help shape. We have the procurement element, And I think one of the things we're working really hard on is to not make that the dominant phase of and stage of commissioning. And I think we've heard really well from Ben how procurement and the approaches to procurement and rules can get in the way and potentially stifle innovation and new initiatives, or how it can support that. And what we're working really hard on, and particularly through our commissioning governance board, which is the corporate board that both Matt and I sit on, but covers the whole of the council, is how we can try and break the mould a bit, move away from some of our traditional procurement exercises that can, and approaches that can exclude important organisations and opportunities, but equally recognising that we work within a legal framework, and we have to make that work for us. And then the monitoring and evaluation. So how do we know that what we've done has made a difference? And again, as has already been said, we keep your KPIs, so key performance indicators, to the absolute must-haves, and let's really focus on outcomes and understanding the impact of what we've done, as opposed to just counting numbers, and getting the balance right is really key to understanding whether we have commissioned quality services, whether we are having the right impact, and whether the right outcomes are being achieved. Next slide, Amy. Just to give some information about where our money currently goes. So what we're commissioning, and you can see that the highest level of spend is currently within our supported living and day services. So that's predominantly services for people with learning disabilities. Very little spend, so 1%, currently on what we'd class as preventative or prevention services. It's still a sizable amount of money, just under 2 million. And when we look at sort of broader activity around that arena, that there'll be other funding other than the adult social care budget. But nevertheless, in terms of where we're clearly focusing our attention and what we want to achieve, that percentage split really needs to shift, and we need to be sure that we're putting our funding where it's going to have the greatest impact. Next slide, please, Amy. So in terms of care homes, we currently have an annual spend of around 79 million. We have 79 registered homes in the borough, a mix of residential and nursing. The majority are supporting mainly older people, which won't come as a surprise. And then we have a smaller number supporting adults with more complex needs. In terms of the split, we are fairly concentrated in that just under half of the beds in the borough are provided by 6 providers. And in the main, our providers are providing a good quality service. We have 16 who do currently require improvement, and 2 that are classed as inadequate. And we're working really closely with those homes and with the Care Quality Commission. But we actually, as a borough, the level of rating that we have for our homes is good compared to the England and the North West averages. Next slide, please. In terms of care at home, so the services that are directly provided to people in their own homes, we've got an annual spend of around 28 million with 76 registered providers in the borough. Again, the majority support older people. We have 11 providers specialising in supported housing and extra care, and 28 specialising in support for people with complex mental health, physical or learning disabilities. Again, the performance of our providers is good, with the vast majority being rated as good or outstanding, and only 5 requiring an improvement. And we perform really well, again, compared to the England and the North West average on that. Specifically for domiciliary care, and we know we've spoken in previous sessions around the challenges of capacity and workforce. We currently commission what we call a prime provider model. So we have 3 main providers who pick up the majority of care, with a framework of 15 providers picking up the remainder. So around 61% of hours are delivered by 4 providers. So again, a very concentrated market. Next slide, please, Amy. This slide is just showing how spend has shifted over the past 5 years, and really the increase in spend across every category, really, reflecting both the costs of care and where we're trying to commission. We've had a real drive to try and, over a number of years, to support people to remain at home and reduce the reliance on residential and nursing spend, and we were being really successful at that. I think as we've spoken about before, the pandemic definitely had an impact on that, and I think, as Pip said, the increase in admissions from hospital into care homes to enable flow out of hospital at a much faster rate definitely has had an impact on the number of people that we're now showing as residing in residential or nursing care, and we're working really hard with our health partners to reverse that and move us back in the direction that we were moving in. But clearly we are investing a significant amount more in care at home, and despite the huge challenges around capacity, we are commissioning around 20% more care at home services than we were a couple of years ago. Next slide, please, Amy. We know, and we've spoken in previous sessions, real challenges in the adult social care market, and North West ADAS has described that as, we're at a tipping point, and that was being said before the pandemic, and things really have only increased over the last couple of years. Their research back in 2018, really strong messages to us, and again we've heard that echoed this morning, that local authorities in the North West region cannot continue to support the same number of people for the same amount of their lives using the same support models as now. So a really strong voice for change and transformation, and we've heard that spoken about really eloquently this morning. We know that our models are not sustainable either from a workforce perspective, from a finance perspective, but equally not necessarily achieving the right outcomes for people either. People quite rightly want more choice and more personalised services, and we heard really strongly from Anne earlier about what's important to her and the things that she wants to do. We know that incremental change is not sufficient, and we are talking about system-wide transformation. We've put the link in, I think you might have had this in a previous session as well, but to the North West ADAS 2030 vision, which in a very short, succinct video explains the challenges, but also the opportunities and change needed over the next few years. Next slide, please. So transforming adult social care markets, as we've said, we need to be transformational. We need to shape the market over a longer period of time and take a 10-year view. And again, we've heard this morning how we can't look for quick fixes and short-term gain all the time. This has to be something that will evolve and transform over a longer period, and we have to be comfortable with that, or we'll never get out of the firefighting and the crisis management that we've all been in previously. It needs to be evidence-based, and we need to understand in greater depth what people want and what works. We need to think differently about how needs can be met, and that great hearing again from Pip and Ben on that. This doesn't have to be about a bed all the time or a building. It won't look, or doesn't have to look, the same as things have looked for the past 10 years. We need to work differently with our providers and other organisations to design new models of care, and we know that our current care at home providers, for example, are really open to looking at how we can work differently, But equally, we're having those conversations with communities and with our community-led support approach. I'm really keen, obviously, to work with PIP around the community catalyst model that really complements community-led support. So we need to develop those new ways to encourage the growth of new markets. And we need to support the development of resilient, value-based and high quality workforce. Next slide, please, Amy. So just some examples of how this is being adopted. Obviously, we've got community sector commissioning is really helping to shape a new commissioning environment. Our community-led care, so our new approach to commissioning of early intervention and carer services, and Gary Cliff touched on that earlier. Care at home, we're working to design new models, and we're also working with our health partners, and that's both acute and community and clinical commissioning group, to look at system investment. It really is that key element of how can we move money around the system, and Pip touched on that earlier. But we have now got that open door and joined up conversations about funding is there, but it's not always funding the right things, and we need to unlock it so that we can fund the innovation and the change that we need. Fair cost of care exercises. We've been carrying out these exercises for the last couple of years, and obviously now mandated as part of the social care reform requirements, and really important that we get fees right, so that terms and conditions are right, and that we have the right amount of investment in the sector. Closer integration with health, which I've touched on and I'll come on to. Investment in the workforce, recognising the importance of the workforce. We've done lots, as much as we can, on a very kind of short-term basis. So any funding that's become available, we've put out into the sector. We've funded bonus payments to staff. We've written to staff. We're looking at investing in registered managers across the borough to help with their development, their resilience, and it's also a theme in homes that are requiring improvement, that it's about investing to be sure that they are well led. But we do need to get to that sort of parity of esteem for the social care workforce. We need to use quality as a driver for market development, and we all need to be sure about what good looks like. We're also looking at our commissioning function, and again trying to move out of silos and aligning more to a whole life cycle approach as opposed to service-led approach. Shifting operational commissioning practice towards designing future models and developing future markets. So moving us out of that procurement cycle where it's very much about a contract's coming to an end, we need to plan the next procurement activity, actually starting at a much earlier point, and really focusing our efforts and attention on developing the right models moving forward. Plans for market shaping, so the use of sort of think tanks, bringing commissioners together with providers, with people who use services, with industry experts and academia, so that we take a much more inclusive and open approach. And this commission has been really valuable in starting our journey with that. And also we've been looking at training for our commissioners, so through NDTI, who are supporting us as our strategic partner for community-led support. We're bringing in strengths-based commissioning, relational commissioning support for our commissioning officers. So that theme and importance of strengths-based working and community assets is right there, both from frontline through to our commissioning activity. Next slide, please. So this was really just to give a quick sort of overview of our integrated commissioning. And the opportunities really that are now available to us through the integrated care system. We've got some long-standing examples of where we've commissioned jointly with health over many years. So examples being our community equipment service, our advocacy service, so jointly commissioning services where there's been a shared need and a shared interest. And we've got a really good examples of integrated strategies. So the most recent being our learning disabilities and autism strategy, which is a great piece of work, sets out some bold ambition and some strong sort of commissioning, funding and development intentions across health and social care. But the integrated care system and all of those changes bring about real opportunity to take this much further. In operating as a Cheshire West and Chester Place, so the whole borough, we have our integrated planning and delivery work stream, which is reporting to the place exec. And this is where we're trying to set out our ambition and priorities and timeframes for integration, the opportunities across services and functions, where pooling budgets would bring benefits and pooling of resources. But we're very clear in this that full integration is not necessarily the destination for all functions. It's only appropriate where there are clear benefits and where it will improve outcomes. What we're very clear about is we don't want the next 2, 3, 4 years to be us lost in the world of integration, structures, and be very internally focused. It's about taking us as far as we need to go and as quickly as we need to go to improve, to achieve improved outcomes. And I think for me in all of that, it's really more important than ever that we have a very clear vision and narrative for adult social care to inform and underpin this work, so we have a truly system, place-based but people-based approach to how we move things forward. We don't get lost in the immediacy of the pressures that we see in some of our health systems, so particularly acute, and that we can take that step back, keep the value base right, and take a longer term view, which again I think is this commission has got a really significant and powerful role to play. And over to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlotte, for that overview and look at how we're responding in Cheshire West to the challenges and looking to how we can do things differently. I've got a couple of questions coming up. So I think I'd like to ask a question myself first about, we've had a very powerful presentation from Pip Cammons at Community Catalyst today, and we already have the work with the National Development and Improvement Team, is that right, on community-led care. How would you see those models? Would you see them as potentially complementary? How would you see them working together? Do they seem to have very similar messages, which is, you know, messages that important we hear as well about developing services that people want and that help them to lead the good life they want to lead in their own home or in a place they can call home. So could you just talk that through before I go on to, I can see I've got 3 questions up.
Thanks, and I know Pip's put a hand up so she can come in and help with this. But yeah, that's exactly the question I had with NDTI, because I've followed really keenly the work of Community Catalyst for a number of years, because I think it really is the way to go, and the outcomes and the opportunities. And so I had that conversation about, would that, if we brought Community Catalyst in as well, would that be duplication? But absolutely, NDTI and Community Catalyst working really well together. And I think, Pip, you can speak probably from a more practical experience there, but it is about, so how do we make all the community-led support, and that's the strengths and assets-based approach, how do we make it real? And I think, Pip,
spot on. So Charlotte, absolutely right. This is the sort of, so NDTI sort of creates the frame. It creates the strategy, the approach, the way of working that I was talking about that Somerset bit. That was the CLS bit. It's the way of working, the strength-based, etc., the practice change, the conversations, etc. And we work really well. We're working in a number of authorities in partnership with CLS, and for me, you can't do one without the other. And I say that as a commissioner, not just as obviously a provider with interest. I think, you know, you can't open up the world to thinking differently into a strength-based approach if you haven't got the stuff that you need then to be able to point people at and to provide that creates that community environment, that diversity. So you need stuff like the stuff that Ben's offering. You need stuff like the micro enterprises. You need community circles or Keyring or all of the above. You know, you need different types of things because people are all different and they all have different responses. So yeah, we work in hand in glove with NDTI. So, you know, our approach, our strategy, our vision are very similar, but we are deliverers. So we help implement and on the ground provision, change the marketplace, etc. But we absolutely align to all the principles and the approaches that NDTI are putting in place with you. So yeah, it works.
Thank you. That's helpful to clarify that, because we've had a presentation from NDTI as well, which was very much welcomed. So I'll move on to questions from our members. So Count Lynn Riley and then Gary. Lynn. Lynn, you might still be on, I think you are still on mute.
And I still think her hand never went down, Chair.
Right, in which case you're next, Gary.
Yes, no, thank you very much. You know, yeah, very interesting, Charlotte. Thank you very much. And I would just like to respond to what you've just said in terms of bringing other things together as well, because we're doing some work at the moment that's been commissioned by the local authority and Cheshire West ICP to look at care communities and how we integrate the voluntary community faith sector into the care community steering groups. And in terms of the way that we're thinking at CWVA, Cheshire West Voluntary Action, you might as well do that for everything and not just community care, health related things. So if we're talking about, and we've been talking to Matt about this, the whole subject of market shaping, and, you know, having sort of members of ours and members of the sector coming together and trying to provide, you know, some solutions. And as Dale was saying yesterday in a meeting we were having, that you and I were both in, Val, we need to define the problem together, don't we? We need to define what the problem is in the first instance before we start allocating, you know, solutions to it. And of course, people with lived experience need to be there too. So all I'd say is we just need to continue to bring all this together, don't we? You know, because we're literally doing the work. We, as in CWVA, have been commissioned to do the work on how could care communities work. And how could we integrate that? There's no point in doing that if at the same time we're also then talking about community catalysts being introduced and all the other stuff. It's not that it's one size fits all, but it may well be. I think community catalysts are a great idea, but also social prescribers, as we've said, you know, and community. There's link workers, community connectors that are managed by, you know, that David Briggs introduced at one point. You know, there's community development officers that are working for Cheshire West together. You know, there's all sorts of different connectors and link workers and social prescribers, and now we're talking about creating potentially another set of alliances that are linked to steering groups. So I think we just need to try and bring it all together, don't we? And so that was my first comment, but also a question back to Charlotte. As I said when I mentioned it, I think we're all on the same page, aren't we? None of us are saying anything different. So what do you need from this commission to make that job easier? How do you want us to present information? How do you want this commission to be as effective as it can be in helping you achieve the things that you want to achieve?
Thanks, Gary. I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. I don't think there's been disagreement throughout any of the particular themes of these sessions. And I think it's that recognition and endorsement of, yeah, this is the way to go. This is what we need to do. And it's back to Pip's slide, which is the catchphrase that I think was from Leeds originally, but I know, you know, lots was using, where we've got to be brave. We absolutely know that, and we need that kind of being endorsed across from a local authority perspective. but equally, you know, from a whole system perspective. But also it's, you know, we've got to be prepared to try new things. So that whole thing of don't break the law, don't break the bank, you know, essentially nothing should be off limits if it's delivering what's meaningful and right for people, or we'll miss the opportunities. I think the other thing for me, so it's the endorsement and that acknowledgement of acceptable risk taking and being brave and bold, which I think we absolutely have to if we're going to get into transformation, as opposed to just tinkering around the edges. I think the other point is recognising that this won't be fixed overnight. And I think patience is the other. Trust and patience is absolutely key, because people will look at it and think, well, that's great, and it's been done somewhere else, so just transplant it. But things evolve, and we know that, and we're starting to see that, but it will take time, and we have to not lose our nerve and just hold on to that. And I think the other two points are that recognition of culture change. And I think that's really important when we need to see this, not just from a, you know, what is the local authority going to produce out of this, but actually what it needs to mean for the system as a whole. So ourselves, health partners, community organisations, independent businesses, etc. And that recognition really that it has to be all of the above, kind of committing to this as well, that it can't, and you've just described it can't just be one element. Otherwise we're going to be straight back to silos and a poor use of resources really for people. So yeah, no, just great. A small ask.
Yeah, no, that's great. You know, as you probably all know, I don't do patients, but I get it's a long term. It is a long term, but I think we've got to be. It's not just a programme and a commission that produces a report that goes on the shelf, as we've kept saying, isn't it? It needs to have an end point that makes a difference. So yeah, I hope that we can, as a commission, do that, Val.
Thanks, Gary, for asking that really good question, and Charlotte for responding. And I guess that our discussions and the presentations we've had are a part of a culture change, aren't they? That as a group of people, we can begin to understand more, be able to support the changes, and we're aware of the bumps in the road that Pip has described, where things might not go well straight away, but understanding what the ultimate objective is, which is providing care that people, in a way that people want, and the prevention, so that people can stay at home as long as possible and stay as independent as long as possible. That things, we're part of that. We're now our discussions and then our recommendations hopefully will endorse the way forward and push it further forward. So have we any other questions for Charlotte? There must be an issue. Pip mentioned the invest to save approach, which is about resources, isn't it? And that there are a lot of pressures on us with our health colleagues to get people out of hospital, which is what we want to do. But and so have you any comments on that, Charlotte, on how, you know, how we're going to find the resources to invest to save? So, yeah, I'm putting you on the spot there.
You are putting me on the spot. However, I think you're right, and I think for me it is about how we move money around. So, I mean, you'll have seen from the slides we showed around where our adult social care spend goes, and we spend a lot of money. It's not an insubstantial amount, and I think as a local authority, whilst every year we have to come up with our savings plan, we are afforded a level of protection and priority, and we do get investment and we do get growth. And I think, you know, we can't lose sight of that, and we need to be sure that the funding that we're using responsibly. Equally, the amount that's in the health system, you know, our budget pales, doesn't it, in comparison? And I think we are having now, and it's not to say anybody's immediately, you know, out with the checkbook, but we are having those sensible discussions about where is our collective spend, because I think it's then we can see, and we spotted already, and I mentioned we've got a piece of work underway with the 3 hospitals. This is across Cheshire West and Cheshire East, the 3 acute trusts and our CCG partners, where we are looking at where is the funding locked that actually we could release to have a better care at home offer that would either prevent people being admitted to hospital or allow people to be discharged in a more timely way. And a lot of that is going to have to be about moving money around, but we know there are millions locked in the wrong services. So I think there's an element of that. But I think there is also an element of us trying to be as creative as we can with any funding that becomes available, and also looking outside of adult social care. And we've given, you know, corporately, all directors have had the NDTI community-led support presentation and are buying in. And it's about everything that's going on. I mean, Gary, you know, gave a really simple example there of the number of now community-focused groups or initiatives. So I think for me, our starting point has to be about looking at collectively, both across as a whole council and with our health partners, where our funding is going, and start to align and free up funding. And certainly through that the prevention early intervention work stream, that's where we're starting to get to, and we're definitely spotting areas of duplication that we could use our money more wisely. And we've had some investor save schemes within adult social care, particularly around our approach to learning disability services and how we can improve outcomes there. But it is always a challenge, and particularly as you know, as we do have to come up with our savings at the same time.
Yeah, I think we could discuss a recommendation around ensuring that there are sufficient resources to drive this change and transformation forward, having listened to what Pip has said about you know, that being brave enough to do that. So I think Lynn, are you now wanting to ask a question?
I am, and apologies, I had to leave the chat for a brief period. Do apologise about that. Yes, I mean, I think Charlotte makes a good point around funding and challenges, but the art of the possible for residents in Cheshire West and Chester is to live up to the ambitions of the integrated care system that were first, you know, floated in 2016. You know, were endorsed at Cabinet only last week, Val, where we pool our budgets, because it doesn't matter to me where my taxes go, whether they are allocated to the council, to the police, the fire, the rescue, the health service. My taxes go out of my bank account and are allocated for the good of, you know, me and my family locally. You know, it is for the public sector to find ways to be more effective in its pooling of resources, because we are a £2 billion public sector economy in Cheshire West and Chester when you add up everybody's cumulative spend. And that is an awful lot of money where, you know, if we're going to be honest about it, there's a huge amount of replication, duplication, wasted spend that could be put into frontline for somebody somewhere. So I think those ambitions around pool budgets are absolutely have to be enshrined right as one of our key recommendations going forward. I would like to make a suggestion that I've been making for a good 10 years in this council, because every time we ever want to do anything differently, we run up against, it's change. People don't like change. We don't do change. Change is difficult. Change takes an awful lot of time. We have to bring people with us. And we never, ever, ever get into the clever organisational psychology of how we can make change a better process that people can embrace, because there's actually something in it for them. You know, we're not changing things just for the good of our health. We're changing it because we know our staff are under pressure. We're changing it because we know people aren't getting access to frontline care. You know, I don't know about you, Val, but, you know, I've got things I'd like to do in my community other than try and sort everybody's individual problems out that comes to my door. So we're all really up for change, but somehow we're always resistant to it. So, you know, can we please put in some thought process to how we create the sort of environment that we could have a bit of a Somerset going on? Because somehow they've managed to plough a very different furrow in a different council area to the one that we're having at the moment. Can we just learn from why it is that change is so difficult to people? Because we heard, Pip speak really passionately about Stephen Chandler. So, if he's the chair of ADAS, why are people so reluctant to learn from other people's really great experience? It's a complete conundrum to me as to why that is such a difficult process that unless we've invented the idea, we see no merit in it. So, bit of psychology, please.
Let's see Charlotte's response to that. And I wouldn't like to say that all our social care staff are resistant to change, because I know that there are many who want to work in the very best way and are willing to go along, and NDTI are working with them on our pilot. But obviously, yeah, not everybody is, and a lot of people need some support and understanding on that road. But Charlotte, I don't know whether you'd like to speak about the experience so far, about whether you feel our staff are up for it as a whole, or do they need a lot more input, support? I know it's about how comfortable they feel taking risks, isn't it? And if you're the one on the front line who's been under pressure from either somebody at the hospital or under pressure from relatives to get things sorted out now, then that can be a very difficult position to be in. So Charlotte, would you like to just give us a feeling for what the workforce is up for?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. From our own workforce, absolutely up for the change. And actually, I think they've really welcomed the move with to community-led support. And I think their frustration has been how long it's taken us to get there. Really, they've kind of felt held back by systems that are not helpful and rules that are not particularly helpful. And certainly, it's the pilot that we're running. Our first phase of it in Ellesmere Port is very much being led by our own staff and workforce, and they know that they've got free rein for it to evolve and develop. So very much they're owning and leading it, and through that you end up in places that you would never have project planned from the start. So we have to give that flexibility. So I think absolutely we've invested, and our staff are up for that change. I think the culture issues are probably further up each organisation, actually. And so I think the big cultural piece is going to be across health and social care leadership. And particularly when you get into the territories of pooling budgets and moving resources. We've all got, it's a big exercise in letting go of control and sharing control and so forth. And we've all, and that's the piece. Our frontline staff, and I'm probably pretty sure frontline health staff, are not going to be are wedded to our current systems, and it's everybody's got that permission. And I think the other point, and you make a good point, and I think Pip did the same in terms of who's got a person's back, and our workforce know absolutely that they are supported and will be supported, and that I've got their back, their senior manager has their back, their team manager, etc., that we're all in this, and absolutely we accept that sometimes things won't work, and that's okay, because if you don't try it, you're not going to know. So that support and that supportive sort of culture and environment is absolutely key. So but I think there is a piece particularly around leadership.
Okay, thanks, Charlotte. I can see that Gina Lewis. Gina, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. Charlotte has in some ways answered some of the things that I was going to suggest. I put in the chat, it's how we communicate how change is going to be affected. Sorry, and also you're not just talking about those who are providing the service, but you're also talking about people for whom change may be monumental. I know that, I mean, as an outside body, I've been a governor at Leighton Hospital now since I was elected as a councillor for the borough. And I had a previous experience of being a non-exec director in a hospital trust. And the breath of fresh air that's been brought within Leighton Hospital by a leader who has thought outside the box is okay. But I don't think the main problem is about how we as a council and our officers accept change. We have accepted over the last 2 years fundamental change in the way in which we operate. And I think most people have accepted the way in which we now work in terms of that. But the one point that Charlotte brought forward there is where the money is and who has power over it. And people are very acquisitive. They don't like giving up what they've got. And I think that quite a lot of the fundamental problems that we've had with moving into the integrated care partnership situation is about who has the money, who has the resources, how we actually begin to share and pool those. And that's where the fundamental change has to come. But I think also we need to look at the people who are going to be served and what they need. And I think some of the things that both Ben and Pippa brought forward about starting with those people, the people who need our services, is important, because they have probably accepted, this is what I have, this is what I can do, and nobody is really going to take me outside that. And we've got to convince them that there is a better way of doing things. And I think how we communicate that kind of change, whether you want to call it a cultural change, I think it's more about individuals. I mean, I know from my own experience, my life has fundamentally changed in the last 3 years because of my husband's Alzheimer's. And it's taken me time to actually accommodate the different stages since he was diagnosed in 2014. Now, I'm a reasonably versatile person in accepting change. I worked for 20 years with a head teacher who changed everything probably every 2 or 3 years. So perhaps it's part of my DNA that, you know, it works. But there are people who don't believe that we can do better. And I think that's where we've got to really show that we can do better and provide the evidence. And if it takes us more than 6 months of a pilot to convince a few people, then so be it. But I think we can do better than we are doing. But I do feel that the problem we have is with whoever holds the purse strings.
Thank you, Gina. Yeah, the purse strings are important, and of course we've got the great opportunity now with our place arrangements coming on together, and with Del Curtis as our director of both health and care services at the Cheshire West level. Pip, I've seen that you've put something in the chat box. Thank you, about cultural change. Did you want to just come back and say, can you say something in relation to what you've put there? Thank you, Pip.
Yeah, I think it's really important that you recognise that this is full cultural change, and therefore it is about supporting it at all levels. It's not something that is just for the front line to do. It's not just about practice at the front line. This is about the whole organisation, the whole system having a different perspective, a different outlook. So it is about that multiple, you know, because it's no good as sort of social workers individually sort of saying, yes, we sign up to this and we'll get on with it, if they aren't backed up by a process that supports that decision making. So if they perceive there is a risk to their personal reputation or to the decisions that they're making, then they won't make them. So they have to see and feel it's real, that they are being supported in making that change. So that's what I mean about cultural change. It starts at the top, because if they then see budgets being cut, if they then see money being pulled out of prevention and in early intervention, that goes completely against what they're being told is the right thing to do. So that's why you need to look across the whole system, because it can, there's sometimes very what's the right word, the sort of unintended consequences. And I just give you one example. So by looking at silos, we've seen, for example, we stopped gritting because it was a way of making the 10% saving in one particular budget for the roads, for example, in my local authority. What that then meant was that when it came to the winter, we were unable to get support to the older people living above 500 metres, which is quite a lot of older people and people with care needs. It therefore cost a fortune, because a lot of those people then needed to be transported to hospital, because you know that intervention was not going in on a regular basis. They weren't being supported at home, so the costs escalated, but not in the, so yes, the savings were made in the ICE bucket, but they were exacerbated in the social care and health budgets. But that relationship is rarely connected. We rarely look at the you know, the consequences of one decision here on this bit here. So that's what I mean about cultural change. I mean about looking at it in the whole.
Thank you, Pip. Yeah, I think you've reinforced that cultural change needs to happen and be supported at all levels of the organisation. Have we, right, I'm just looking at the chat. Gary, did you want to come in with something there?
Yeah, just we all go around and round in meetings, don't we? It just happens to be the place executive meeting this afternoon, which I just happen to be the representative again for the voluntary community faith sector. And it is a conversation they're having at place executive about it is the leadership that's required from them that's got to be bold, and it's got to be, you know, you've got to be seen to. And Charlotte asked if this commission can, in a sense, you know, give them the permission, the authority, the encouragement, the empowerment to make these changes and to go ahead. And I think you're right. I think it's the same at place level. And every single time we discuss it, every single person on the place executive absolutely agrees that early intervention and prevention is the key. But it then gets into a conversation about how, when the budgets are being cut. And, you know, and the timescales of integration are ridiculously too fast, basically. You know, how on earth can we get that integration to be happening by the 1st of July? So a lot of it's on governance, it's on really complicated conversations about, you know, Section 75s and better care funds and all this sort of stuff, which absolutely needs to be done. But yeah, we need to step back a little and say, okay, but one of the most fundamental things is the fact that we've got to say, yes, we want to do it differently and we want to make change. And I think the place executive are there. So I think the more people can, in a sense, you know, we're talking about risk and culture change, they almost need to be empowered, if that's not a rude thing to say that, you know, we're all behind you. You know, we all think this is, you know, you're not going to be left alone looking behind you, wondering where, you know, where's all that enthusiasm gone. if they could provide that enthusiasm, I think we're really in a good place.
There are certainly some opportunities there, aren't there? And also there, I think, a need really for the place executive to start the way it needs to carry on, to demonstrate that what's it's put the words into action. Yeah, so thank you, Gary. Lynn, are you coming back?
I am, just to continue to make the point that Gary's just made, is we always start with the wrong question, in my humble opinion, because what we need to start with is the why, not the what and the when and the how and the who. Because if we are starting with the why, we create that central mission and vision that we can all subscribe to. And, you know, Gina mentioned about, you know, the outstanding and very obvious cultural change that she's seen in Leighton. Sadly, I've spent too much time in Clatterbridge, but, you know, you walk into Clatterbridge Hospital at the worst time of your life, and you know, the minute you step over the threshold there, that every member of staff knows what their mission is and what, you know, what they're going to personally do to get to that mission. It's the NASA thing. What's the man pushing the brush do? He puts men on the moon. If people are on mission and they know why they are employed in the job that they are, you know, you've got to bring in the psychologists, because somehow, you know, health have cracked this, but I don't believe that we have. I think we had cracked it, but I think we've lost that in the council, and we cannot continue to have these discussions about it's all about the Section 75 and the governance. We always put the plumbing in place before we decide where we want that plumbing to go, and for the reasons that it does. And I will keep saying this, Val, and I know I'm like a broken record with it, but, you know, we have to start with what Pip was talking about. It has to be a people-centric process that we fit everything around what it is, or why we're trying to do different things with people. You know, and the governance, you know, should inform that process. But we always put the governance in place first and then find all the things that we can't do because the risk register doesn't marry up with, you know, the aspirations and the potential in this particular community. So, you know, we've got to, you know, stop doing everything that we do in this way and start thinking about, if we're really serious about, you know, change at any level, you know, we've got to bring in change in a way where people go, you know what, I can sign up to that. That's going to make my life better. It's going to make my job easier. I'm going to go to work, you know, and be pleased to go to work. Ask any member of staff in the NHS or the council what drives them mad, and it's not the job that we're asking them to do. It's the way we ask them to do their job. It's the stress of the paperwork and the bureaucracy and the this and the that and the other that's never in place. It's not, you know, do you hate being a nurse, caring for people? Because that's why people go into those jobs in the first place. But it's the systems and the processes that we make people jump through that separates them from that vision and that sort of core principle that, you know, made people want to work for the public sector in the first place. And I will keep saying that. Sorry.
No, that's okay. And the trick is when we want to bring this commission together, is to have some recommendations that put that people-centric approach into as some recommendations and into actions to either support or further develop some of the actions which are already starting. We're pushing at an open door. We need to support the how we achieve it, and I think that people-focused, people-centric is where we need to start with our recommendations. So sorry, I've had my camera off while I was speaking. Oh no, I've turned, or perhaps I've had it there. So have we any more questions? And if If not, I think it might be time for me to say thank you very much indeed. We've had some really good presentations. It was a great way to start with Anne telling us about what she enjoys about her life and the activities that she takes part in and enjoys, and the people that she lives with. And then Pip and Ben have given us some really excellent presentations. I think feel a lot of enthusiasm and positivity in the virtual room, and Charlotte's obviously working towards those objectives, starting with our work with CDTI, and looking at how we're commissioning, and also looking to the possibility of working with Community Catalyst. So thank you very much to everyone for a really great session. I'm absolutely amazed that we might be finishing 15 minutes early, but after a good and intensive session, I think that is fine. And I'd just like to remind everybody that we will be having another meeting on the 23rd of May to try and bring our discussions to a conclusion, and we'll be circulating some information before then for members and some of the partners as well who've contributed to help us move to some conclusions and recommendations. So I can't see any hands up, so I would just like to say thank you very much for another really great session. Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you, Val.
And goodbye.
Thank you, Val.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.